Hey, what's up, guys? How's it going? So, I pretty much zeroed another alliance. As per the norm, we've found another alliance that we decided to wipe out. So, the reasoning behind it, of course, it's like I kind of give you a mantra in war, right? Which is to say that oftentimes most of the major alliances in the top 10, right? To give you kind of a breakdown, it's basically gotten to the point, right, where you've got one major alliance, one Discord server, and everybody in that cohort, as I'd like to put it, likes to dictate rules. And those rules they try to enforce and apply on all of the alliances, and they don't necessarily like to apply those rules equally. And then it gets to the point where it's too bureaucratic to the point where, all right, this one alliance decides that it's going to go pick on a smaller alliance because nap 12, right? And don't do this, don't do that, don't hit this alliance, don't hit that, and pretty soon, it's like I feel like you get to a certain point, right, where your alliance has the capacity to just completely obliterate an alliance. Okay? And then this is pretty much where we are. We're at this point where, okay, I could choose to do nothing, but RPZ goes over, basically gets fought out of a fort. Their response to this is to go over to ORZ and hit their banners, hit their forts. And this is a smaller alliance. This is, for context, it'd be like if a top 10 alliance is fighting a top 24. So they're a 24 leader size guild alliance. So by all means, it's open season for them, right? They're the smaller alliance, therefore they can pick on them. The problem is all the members from this alliance that they're picking on just so happen to be in KAF. And of course, naturally, when you're looking at it from this perspective, you go, I could choose to do nothing, but they know damn well they're from KAF. And they're hoping that by this little loophole that they can just sit there, pick on a smaller alliance, and nothing will come of it. Nothing will happen. And oh, how wrong they were. Because we were rather, we weren't terribly happy with the way that they decided to approach things, and of course, they said that they had things settled and that, everything was going to be fine. And that, it's like, well, I really wasn't buying it. So, talking to Fox, talking to a couple of other members, it finally came to the conclusion that what they had done was just unforgivable. So, I went out of my way and I was like, I haven't done Brother in Arms yet, but, considering the last video I did where I wiped out all of PCL seemed pretty dramatic and massive and in its own fashion, I thought, well, all right, let's just go ahead and see if we can outdo ourselves, shall we? After all, we've gone from being somewhat important, being that, you can see I now have all mythic gear. We're not mythic T1 all the way, but we're mythic, and then we're at least charms 3 to 2, on most pieces. So for the most part, we have a pretty significant statistical difference now. I mean, so much so that, as you can tell, it doesn't take a lot in this game to basically mollywop the hell out of just about everybody, because most people are free to play. And then the handful that aren't free to play, they'll come across somebody like me, and I am the literal doom that they also did not want in their lives. And it's the thing where, for context, making like 700 troops of T10 takes about 11 hours for me to do right now. But starting out, it was like a 15-hour to even like a 2 or 3 day process, right? So contextually, what matters here is the fact that for these guys, it's going to cost them more in these troop losses than it's costing me. I guess is really what I'm trying to get across here. Like, you can see a lot of these guys, they're going to start shielding. It didn't take very long for people in their alliance to start complaining in the world chat and basically start, throwing up their arms and saying, what the heck? What did I do? And it's like, It's nothing personal. It never is. It's like, I mean, if there's anything that's personal, right? It's what, if anything, we'll have a video for it. It'll be, for Castle Event. That's the only time where it'll ever probably get personal, But so far, it's been, in this instance, it's more or less me just establishing dominance and pointing out that yes, if your alliance does something and you commit a wrong against KF in some capacity, that there probably will be consequences that will follow suit. I don't typically like to bully alliances, though. It's not like there's some kind of power and difference between the people that are in the alliance and not. It's like at the end of the day, this is really more of a response in reply to the fact that they decided to hit banners. They thought it was a good idea. And then they went out of their way to, basically stomp on a smaller alliance. And it's like, okay, if you're going to stomp on a smaller alliance, I'm going to remind you who the smaller alliance is. Because the way I see it, you can't infringe on alliances, even though, yes, it sounds like a great idea on paper, right? Don't burn their banners, in my opinion. It's like that's one of those things that you crossed the line. You got upset. You thought you could get away with that, and I'm just setting the precedent that hey, you can hit people's bases fine, but the moment you step into banner territory, that's where I have no consequence in my mind of erasing your entire existence at that point, because to me, at least in a game like this, right? And I don't know, when you play Whiteout Survival for the first time, for those of you that are still kind of new to this game or just kind of wondering, kind of the philosophy behind it, it's very much similar to like Rise of Kingdoms, and it's got some similarities and, comparisons to Lords Mobile even. And I don't know. I would say the easiest way that I could kind of break it down for you is that a lot of players start out free. And I think that's totally fine. It's got a great PvE aspect to it. It's got a lot of PvP opportunities. And typically, people like me are, we're asinine in the sense that, a lot of the people that happen to come across people like myself, they hate my ever, I don't know how else to say. It's just like, it's, I'm sorry for the yawning, but like, I don't like to go out of my way to zero entire alliances. This is the second time that I've had to do this, though. And it's really because other alliances are stepping in and trying to dictate rules that only apply to them. So they'll go over trash another alliance that's related to us in some fashion. But then when all the cards settle, they'll go, oh, well, no, KF is to blame for this and KF is to blame for that. We're at the top alliance, so naturally everything that we do is always going to be looked down on. The frustration really comes down to the fact that we've got state versus state coming up, we have castle coming up, and tensions are getting pretty high. And the thing is that one of the two alliances in the entire state have now become enemy number one, according to the hegemony that is FCAN and its cohort of NAP, which is nothing more than a short-listed group of people that either fall in line with what FCAN says or does, or ends up on the crosshairs. And truthfully, that's not really an NAP, in my opinion. It's really a short-sighted way of basically saying, hey, my way of the highway or everyone else suffers. And the thing is they're in no position to be making those kind of demands when it's pretty evident that, when I'm capable of wiping out all of RPZ, you have no way of enforcing that. If you get in our way, we'll just walk all over you. It's not a question of whether or not, and it's not personal though, right? Not yet anyway. But it's kind of like trying to establish the fact that we know all too well that the state needs to survive and unite and it needs to grow. But we're also very conscious of the fact that there are obviously other actors in our state that would like to think that they can just dictate the rules on others, stomp on their wishes and dreams. And KF is in no capacity to share. If we so choose, we can just pick up and take control of the forts. We can run and wipe entire alliances out, and we have that capacity. Does it mean we enjoy doing it? No, not really. I don't really wake up and decide, I think this alliance needs today. Because if I wanted to do that, I'd be doing it every day. The thing is it ultimately in the bigger picture of it, right? Is I'm really trying to get the alliances that are out of line back into line. Like in this case, this alliance thought, let's just burn on the smaller. The problem is it's a bigger fish eating a smaller fish, and a smaller fish eating an even smaller fish. It's effectively the same form of bullying. It's just the it's okay when I do it. Just don't do it to me. And that's I think the kind of the consequence of these type of games, is that people get into this long drama over like who has the capacity to just do those kind of things, but it's like in no way, shape, or form does it really matter. Now, I will say that, if you're trying to play the game and you're not wanting to be on the receiving end of these kind of attacks, I would say, typically you need to have a pretty well organized alliance. And that means you need to have a Discord, you need to have an R4 leadership, you need to have people that are very, very well aware of what their members are doing. Because if they act out of line, which in this case it sounded like it started out as one RPZ member getting a little hot headed, and then, from what I gathered, he just thought, oh, well, I'll just go do something and act alone. Well, the problem with that mistake is RPZ as a whole is basically suffering in part because of that person's actions, and of course that person now I think has left the game, but he's probably also caused a majority of their alliance probably now to quit the game, in part because I just went through and wiped literally all of them out. But it's because of the lack of response. It's well, we didn't really kick them until, you kind of forced your hand. It's like, well, you should have probably communicated a little sooner than that, and it's one of those things where, and a game like this, if it goes on for longer than 24 hours, and I don't see an adequate response that, isn't jumping over joy, hand over heel, saying, look, we didn't mean to do it. Sorry, whatever, right? And you don't effectively punish the person that was responsible for it. No, I'm not going to really take it as, you're sorry. What you're saying is, I'm sorry that I got caught, which that just doesn't sit well with me, and so, in more than one way, it's just, it's kind of like a shark eating a bigger fish. It's just another day for me. And, I don't know, and you play these kind of games, and don't get me wrong, it's like it's kind of a power struggle. There always is. I will say that one of the advantages of having tier Gen 1 heroes at their tier, right, and then also having, like, the gear tier. And I showed you that stuff in the beginning because it kind of gives you an idea. These guys maybe have 150%. They're nowhere near 400%. Now, the few players in the entire state, there's only maybe 3 other guys that are anywhere near. And most of them, they're not going out of their way wiping out troops like this. It's like, in this one video alone, I'm going to burn somewhere north of like 40 to 50,000 T5, or not T5, but T10, and not one but 2 unit types. So I probably burned like 100,000 T5 in this video, okay? But I'd like to kind of give you an I don't know what this guy was thinking. He's like, yes, I'm going to attack, and he like sends a solo at me. Okay, mind you, I'm furnace level 30, and you're like furnace level 24. I mean, I'll give you that. You tried, but you can see the losses were like upwards of 10K there for that solo. Like, not a good idea. No, not a good idea. I can do it, right? But you're lower level. You're gonna, and obviously when I turn around and hit him, he's like, "Whoa!" I may have bit off a little bit more than I could chew there. It's one of those things where, I mean, especially in this game, right? You better know who you're up against. And I think the struggle is, especially when you're starting out. I'd say if you run into somebody like this, right? They're level 30 plus. Your best bet's probably either to shield up, which is what a majority of these guys that were smart did, or you leave your alliance, you go find a new one because they did something they should not have done. Sometimes it happens, with reason. Other times it doesn't. But typically, you want to be in the NAP 10. It's just to say you want to be in the top 10 alliances. If you're not, you're typically going to be finding yourself in the you're going to find yourself in a really, really bad spot 99.9% of the time, and it's like I can't really stress how important that is if you're going to be playing this game, but like you don't want to be on the receiving end of a whale. And that's the thing, it's like it's not the first time I've done this. I'm sure there are probably other member states within our alliance. Well, I guess what I'm trying to get across here, right, is it's very easy to watch this video and look at us like we're abusing our authority and our power, that we have the capacity to just walk all over people and that we have no problem doing so. And it's, yeah, I mean, there's not even some secret of that, it's like in many ways, what I say will probably come off sounding very contradictory, because you'll probably see my action as, it's like, well, hell, if the rules apply to thee, then you don't really apply those same rules to yourself. And it's like, you're right. It's very much a thing, it's like I'll probably go out of my way and do things vindictively on my own reasoning, right? But that doesn't really necessarily match up with what the entire alliance is going to end up doing as well. It's like the individual here and the collective, at times we may not completely line up. Like, not gonna deny that. Now, of course, this guy here gave it an honest try. The biggest mistake he made here is he thinks that I'm not gonna swing back. He's like, what he does is he basically teleports, and he's burning either teleports or gems. And as you can tell, that doesn't really work out because I'm a little, I'm like, okay, well, then I'll just speed it up. Like, you want to continuously run, fine, go ahead. You're going to either burn up gems or you're going to wind up shielding. One of the two. And you can pick your poison there. You're more than welcome to do so. But eventually I will hit you. Which, as you can tell there, I hit him once and boom, there went 30 some odd thousand. Obviously, I could have probably killed a lot more. But in one single hit, I wiped out 30,000 troops. It's like, probably not a good idea to play Tango with a furnace level 30 that's, closer to the min-max than most people are. Like, not a good idea. I will say, for the honest effort that they gave, don't get me wrong, I know a lot of them are probably innocent for the actions that were committed that day by, or is he, and that, it's fine, it's like, I get it. I mean, in many ways, more than one, I'm sure a lot of these players that are going to wake up are probably not going to be the type of people that are actively going out of their way to make other people suffer. And, it's a shame that, that they happen to be on the other end of this and that they have to pay the price, but that is why it's a war game. It's like, at times, you kind of have to, if your leadership isn't conscious of this and they're not paying any attention to this, and then they allow the act of one person to pretty much effectively destroy themselves and bring their whole alliance to the ground, I mean, that's, I don't know, it's like you got to kind of keep your people in check, and if you're not keeping them in check and you don't do something about it pretty quick, then yeah, the repercussions for that are pretty goddamn significant. It will certainly put people in their place, but it's one of those things that this is part of the reason why I kind of enjoy playing Whiteout Survival, though. You look at like a lot of other games, and this particular flavor, is, I think, like, oh boy, sorry about the yawning. But one of the things that kind of jumps out at me as far as like Whiteout Survival in comparison to like Lord's Mobile, right? So you don't have cross contamination of states yet. That is not to say you can't like look right next door. You can literally float across the map and you can float from one side to the other. It is stupid easy to do that. And, of course, I explained pretty quickly, I made it very, very clear why it was, I made it clear very, very, I mean, almost right from the get-go, once they started complaining in World Chat. What does that guy do? He's like, oh, I'm so scared. Like, I know that's not the response I want to hear, but okay. Then on the way I go, it's one more, it's like if you're not concerned, then the people that wake up sure as heck will, but either way, in some ways more than one though, it's like, and I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm alone on this, but I feel like the strategy that I employ behind what I'm doing here, by the way, and it's not as complicated. It's just basically you got one group going down south. And look at that. I mean, he's just flaming at this point. It's like that's all this guy can do at this point. He can't even help his own alliance. He's just gonna sit there and flame. But I mean, the strategy I'm employing here is I'm basically what I'll send is one or two solos of the same guy, and then hit. Because basically what happens the first time is they'll go into their infirmary. After a certain point, though, their infirmary will fill up, and then they just start taking losses. And typically what that does is you more than likely kill about 50% of it every single hit. So if there's 20,000, you'll kill 10. If you kill 10, it's 5 to, and so on. So you have to like do numerous hits. That's part of the reason why I'm sending so many solos is because I'm bringing all of these people down to zero as much as I possibly can. Now, because it's the Brother in Arms event, I'm also gaining a stupid amount of score doing this. Now, when it was all said and done, I had around 46 million or so points. And again, it's one of those things that, it didn't have to happen, but they happened to just be on the wrong side that day. So, I mean, that's on them, and there's not really anything to say about it, but I will point out that, like, with a lot of the kind of things that you do in these games, right? Especially if you're, I don't know, I would feel like your effort spent in this game is got to be directed towards something that is consequently going to last you longer than what you will end up doing. So, like, for example, a lot of people like to invest a ton of money into the game, starting out into Gen 1 heroes. That makes sense until Gen 2 shows up, and then Gen 2 makes more sense, and then Gen 3 comes out, and then you want Gen 4 and Gen 5. And that's one thing that most people don't seem to see is that the things that actually kind of stick around longer than that are going to be things like your Chief Gear is a big thing. Your Hero Gear is a big thing. Those are places where you can like transfer Hero Gear from one hero to the next. Your Chief Gear is always something constant. You always have it. And those are the things that if you're going to invest your time and energy into something, like put your effort and time into that because that'll last you a lot longer. The other thing I noticed is a stupid amount of these players, it's like, okay, if you got 200,000 troops and you think you can't be soloed, that's where you're wrong. Don't give yourself this, gigantic storage of troops. I feel like a lot of people do this, but it's like, you don't really need it. Like, I could operate at 100,000. I usually typically go for about as much as my deployment capacity allows. And then anything past that is really just more of an abundance thing. I will say whenever you're going around and doing a lot of solos or any amount of fighting, you almost need an abundance of infantry and an abundance of marksmen. And lancers are the only ones that you don't have to bother with all that often. I mean, as far as trading troops go, I would say it's like a 60-30-10 type deal. I mean, it's 60% infantry, 30% marksman, 10% lancer in my book, in terms of priority of training troops. Because most of the troops you lose are going to be infantry. And then not long after that, you'll start to dip into your marksman. And the lancers are the only ones, really, where I don't find myself having to train as often. Now, I will point out that this is just through solos. It's not through rallies. I haven't done a whole lot of rally fighting yet because I kind of got skimped out on the Foundry battle, which we ended up winning. It sounded like, from what I gathered, we must have aggravated a lot of people because we took a bunch of forts. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of happens when the nap gets broken, and the very peace that we had established gets broken a few days prior to the Sunfire Castle, which as far as Sunfire Castle is concerned, and for those of you that aren't aware, I mean, a lot of this information you can find out in advance by going to the Discord for Whiteout Survival. A lot of the information that I tell you is actually sourced out of there. Like, for example, I know you want to get your hero gear, Mastery Forge level 5, and then you don't want to go any further right out of the gate because that's about where you get the most advantage. I'd only say go higher once you've got all of your gear at level 5 for all of your heroes that you're currently using, or at least, a rotation of 3, which is to say you need to have 1 marksman hero, 1 lancer hero, and 1 infantry hero at level 80, full level 100 set in gear, and Mastery Forge level 5 on all those pieces of gear. That's the only time where I think it makes any logical sense to then proceed to start upgrading your Mastery Forgery level past 5. And I kind of found that out not in a way that I wish I could have. It just kind of worked out that way, but in one way more than another, it's like you learn these things through conflict, and I will say that one of the things that I wish I could have done better from this experience of just sitting here and soloing people even. It's like you can scout people if you want to know in advance. You can rally them if you want to get more collective people involved so you don't have as high of an attrition cost. But even though that I did a lot of this all with solos because of the stat difference being so substantially high between me and the players that I'm hitting, I will point out this is not something I think most people ought to be doing. Because a lot of the time what this does is it will very easily cause an entire state to revolt against you. I mean, I won't deny the fact that by, the actions that I commit, there are going to be large sectors of groups of people in this state that are probably not going to be terribly happy that I went out of my way to wipe out an entire alliance for not the first time, but the second time. But I think it makes a pretty enjoyable video, in my opinion, because, how often do you really see somebody go through and wipe out an entire alliance? You don't see it on Whiteout Survival. Now, I will say that compared to last video, I think I outdid myself this time. I mean, I'm pretty sure my kill count was somewhere north of 16 million or so when it was done, and it was around 8 mil, so I know for a fact I killed around 8 million or so, which it sounds like a lot, but in this game it is and it isn't. It's like, in a way I feel as though you could probably see someone kill a lot more. Naturally, Brother in Arms in particular, you normally just hit the farms. You don't really hit the bases. The bases are where you actually end up losing troops, and that there is actually an associated cost to just going around and soloing and hitting like this. But I mean, do I recommend it? I mean, yeah, it's not like you can't do it. It's one of those things that, if you go into it willy-nilly and you're not prepared for it, like, yeah, you're going to dump quite a bit of time and a lot of troops into this, and I would say for most people, probably not worth doing what I'm doing. If anything, what I'm doing is rather wasteful as opposed to, like, waiting for base events or fighting on forts, because the rewards there are going to stack up and they're going to be a lot more worthwhile. But, for me, I typically only like to do this just to kind of show what's even possible in a game like Whiteout Survival, because you just don't see it. It's not as common. I mean, I don't really see any videos of people doing it, and you don't really have as much coverage over kind of what exactly do you have to expect by doing it, and it's one of those things that, from my experience, it's, even though you can send multiple solos and send multiple, attacks and stuff like that, there's a lot of scuffle, even, and this is just through conversations in the world chat where, people are not, it was obviously not clear that by removing KF out of the NAP agreement, they effectively said, okay, we're the enemy, and therefore, if you're going to treat us like the monster, we will become the monster that you so choose to spit at us as. And it's, it's one of those things where, okay, so it's easy for Kent to go up and be like, you're just killing the state. You're just doing this. We never hit this. It's like, no, those are lies. You had. Like, it's a shame that Kent felt that way, but it is what it is. Like past a certain point, who's right? I don't know. It's just it's really disappointing. And when and then it resolves to just this kind of flaming, and I'm almost kind of ashamed that I have to even stoop to that point. But I like to give a perspective on why it's being done. If they choose to be upset about it, then that's on them. It's just happens a lot more often than you would think. But in some ways, more than one, I think people just they don't really fully grasp the implication of flaming me. It's like, okay, go ahead, continue flaming me, and I'm just gonna continue hitting your guild. If you're not gonna say, okay, we'll handle and address this issue, we'll stop the issue, then yeah, I might feel sorry for your alliance, and I might stop. But if you're gonna continuously flame me, I'm just gonna go, okay, well, you must clearly deserve what I have in store for you. Like it is such an interesting thing to me how people don't have any foresight into knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then as if the situation is bad enough, they had fuel to the fire. Because gaslighting the very person that is going around attacking your alliance is a good idea. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I can't really reason with people like this, but this is pretty much how that went. RPZ basically just like kept trying to change like this guy just, I don't know, he kept going, oh, it's just over this, it's just over that. He wiped in the whole alliance over just this. It's like, no, but you're welcome to tell yourself whatever reason you would like to believe and bring people to your side if you so choose, but from our perspective, it's looking as though you're very much the threat, and you've only validated it, in more than one way. It's like you can't. It can be very frustrating, right, to be on the other end of this, and of course, you try to do good, and so I try to set the example of, listen, you do this, I will demolish your alliance for this reason. I try to be as diplomatic as I can be, because it's like, in a lot of ways, the other alliances are looking at this and going, are they hitting them just because, or are they hitting them for a reason? And every time I've ever hit any alliance, I've always established what that reason was and what that consequence was going to be, should that, demand not be met. Because in my world, everything is up to chance, but it's always negotiable. In some ways, it's, I think, the most fair way to apply this kind of carnage on an alliance, or any person, really, because it's not like these guys woke up one day and just thought, I'm going to go pick on that alliance. And it's the same for me. I'm not out to make other people suffer. It's just really kind of a consequence of people like Kent here, who, I guess they just don't see the bigger picture. And that's okay. It's just unfortunate that it ended up that way, but ultimately, as you can tell, I just wiped one player after another. Tens of thousands of troops died. I hit 46 million points for Brother in Arms. And hopefully you guys found this pretty entertaining. I mean, I enjoyed it. But needless to say, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it off here. But feel free to subscribe if you like Whiteout Survival. And if anything, make sure to like the video and share with friends. And I'll see you guys in the next video.